Study Session 11. Cultural Changes in African Social Institutions. Introduction. There is a popular saying that says, "The only constant in life is change." Changes happen every now and then, and these changes affect social institutions as well. In this last session, you will be intimated with the cultural changes that have taken place in the various social institutions you have learned about in the preceding sessions. Learning outcomes. At the end of the study session, the learner should be able to 1. Define and use correctly all of the keywords printed in bold. 2. Identify the various changes that have occurred in at least two of the social institutions. Cultural changes in African social institutions. Cultural changes within the family institution. The practice of polygamous marriages, in which a man may have more than one wife, is declining in contemporary Africa. Although monogamy is widely accepted above polygamous unions, these unions are plagued with a high rate of divorce, which was uncommon in the past. Recurrent remarriages among divorced individuals are referred to as serial monogamies. Furthermore, unlike in the past when sexual behaviors were strictly regulated, such restrictions no longer exist. In the past, in Nigeria, for example, it was a taboo for a lady to get pregnant before getting married. But nowadays, some elders and clergies advise intending couples to make sure the bride-to-be is pregnant before performing the marriage rites. In addition, in the past, marriages were arranged by parents for their children. They helped their male and female children to find suitable partners. There was nothing like marrying a person because of love. However, this has changed drastically from what it used to be. Although parental consent is still much needed in the eventual choice of a life partner, parents no longer search for spouses for their children, especially in Western, Eastern, and Southern Nigeria. Marriage today is based on the love intending couples have for each other. They only involve their parents when it comes to seeking their approval to get married to the chosen person. Modifications in the economic institution. The economy of Africa was predominantly peasant and pastoral in early times. While some members of the society owned large farm plots, others owned numerous livestock. Apart from these, individuals were trained as artisans in professions like goldsmithing, iron smelting, and so on. The workforce for each trade normally comes from the immediate family of each member of the society. Women or wives were expected to assist their husbands in their trade, and children were trained in the line of their parents' trade from their youth. Hence, everyone had a means of earning a living. There were no problems of unemployment. In fact, individuals had jobs beyond what they could conveniently do. However, as a result of contact with the Europeans and also due to the widespread of industrialization that took place in Europe, African economic institution took a new form. People migrated from the rural areas to the urban centers and even outside the country to look for paid employment, thereby abandoning their trades. The change in the economic system resulted in some social problems which are still present in contemporary Africa. Changes in educational institutions. Education in pre-colonial African context can generally be thought of as a medium for the transmission of the values of the society. Every member of the community had a hand in contributing to the educational upbringing of a child. Education in the past was essentially a societal instrument for the expansion of human culture. In traditional Africa, the educational institutions mainly prepare young persons in the areas of artistic performances, games, festivals, dancing, singing, drawing, and the likes, as well as teaching and socializing the young ones into societal expectations. Furthermore, young persons are trained in the economic professions of their parents so that they could be self-supporting as adults. In most African societies, the high point of the educational experience always comes in form of the rites of passage ceremony, which marks the movement from childhood to adulthood. However, when colonialism took place, many indigenous African educational systems began to change. With the advent of Western form of education, the focus shifted. Both young persons and adults now strive to go to formal schools in order to get certificates for employment outside the home, as well as to compete favorably with others for limited available opportunities. Changes in religious institutions. Indigenous religious beliefs and practices have undergone some cultural and social changes. In communal societies, religion permeated all aspects of society, but in contemporary industrial society, the institution of religion has become separated from many social and economic activities. How did this occur? Most African religious beliefs and practices require blood sacrifices to placate the gods and involve other acts Western countries will refer to as barbaric. Food sacrifices, animal sacrifices, and in serious cases, human sacrifices were regular practices in the indigenous African religions. These sacrifices were done either to placate the gods or win one favor or the other from the gods. In the name of religion, among the Calabar people in Nigeria, twins, as soon as they were born, were buried with their mothers because this was seen as a bad omen. Among other tribes in Nigeria and elsewhere in Africa, female virgins were sacrificed annually to one of the indigenous gods of the people. Apart from these, in the early periods in eastern and western regions of Nigeria, part of the religious and burial rites for kings involved killing many slaves or even free ones to accompany the king to heaven. However, after contact with European Christian missionaries, things began to change. The missionaries taught people how to read and write. As a result of being able to read, people were able to read the Bibles given to them by the missionaries, and they began to have new perspectives on some of their religious beliefs and practices. As a result, adherence to these religious beliefs and practices began to wane. In the past, members of the society connect with their gods through their shamans or priests and receive directions on what to do in all circumstances. However, in Africa today, many people have embraced Christianity and Islam. These religions, although have their own priests that oversee religious affairs, promote individual relationship with God and abhors all sorts of blood sacrifices. Changes in political institutions. In traditional political institutions, succession to leadership positions is mostly hereditary. The heir to the position, be it kingship or positions of chiefs, is always very obvious, even before the death of an incumbent. However, current-day Africa has changed drastically. The influence of kings and chiefs have declined. Due to colonial influence, most African indigenous political systems have been eroded. African leaders have imbibed the political systems of their colonial masters or borrowed other forms of government from the Western world. For example, most African countries have embraced the democratic type of government. African countries that are not yet in democracies are clamoring for such. This is because democracy is said to be the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Members of society now want to be directly involved in controlling their affairs. In democracy, a number of eligible individuals contest for leadership positions on the platform of political parties. To eventually occupy the contested positions, they have to vote and be voted for by their supporters. Most times, there may be speculations that the eventual winner may not always be obvious. Additionally, some African countries are ridden with political unrest due to military insurgencies in a bid to take over power from incumbent governments. To become national leaders, military men sometimes seize power by force through coup d'etat. Sometimes these coups are peaceful, however, most times they could be very bloody. Changes in legal institutions. While Africa has been able to retain some contents of its legal institutions, it has been affected or modified as a result of contact with the colonialists. Before, legal institutions were rooted in indigenous traditions, customs, religious beliefs, and native laws. However, now there has been a mix with foreign types which bears the hallmarks of European culture. Over the years, English and French forms of legal systems and social control mechanisms in African countries have taken on some local variations. In present-day Africa, society depends on the military, police, and general justice system in society to enforce compliance to laws, rules, and regulations, whereas in the past it used to be the duties of family heads, lineage heads, community tribunals, and so on to enforce compliance to societal rules and regulations. While these forms of indigenous legal systems are still operative, they have been overshadowed by Western forms of dispute and conflict resolution mechanisms. Activity 1. Take a moment to reflect on what you have read so far. Based on what you have learned, what major changes have taken place with the marriage and family institutions? Activity feedback. One major change which has taken place within the family and marriage institution is that parents no longer arrange spouses for their children to marry. Since contact with Europeans and colonialists, African indigenous social institutions have witnessed a tremendous change. Study Session Summary. In Study Session 11, you have learned that 1. All indigenous social institutions in Africa have undergone tremendous transformations due mainly to colonialization and European contacts. 2. There is a wide difference between the social institutions in pre-colonial and contemporary Africa. That ends Study Session 11 and the entire course SOC 206. Thank you for listening.